Hi, welcome to Audiobook Academy. This is a self-paced audiobook. There's no need to keep an eye on things. Just pay attention. Thank you for taking the time to listen. This is a book summary of Catch Me If You Can by Frank Abagnale. A quote by Andy Griffith is well known: "Who is going to believe a con artist? She is liked by everyone if she is good." It is the compelling life story of Frank Abagnale Jr., one of the 20th century's most infamous con artists, that is told in Catch Me If You Can. It is unclear how Abagnale managed to cash checks and fake his way into a Pan Am cockpit, among numerous other jobs. The question is, how did he do it, and perhaps more importantly, how did he manage to evade capture for such an extended period of time? This summary will take us on a brief journey through the fascinating life of Frank Abagnale Jr. On the way, we'll look at the influence of his parents as well as how he gained confidence, which led to him becoming more assertive as his confidence increased. At the end, we'll look at how the ultimate thief was able to change his ways and eventually start his own security company. A Tale of Two Parents. Abagnale Jr. was born in 1948 in the Bronxville neighborhood of New York City. His parents were well-to-do, and he had a comfortable upbringing in their home. Despite having had a relatively normal childhood, his adolescence was not without its difficulties. His parents had a complicated relationship in addition to having differing parenting styles. His mother was a strict disciplinarian, whereas his father was more of a laissez-faire type. His father also lavished him with gifts. Frank Abagnale Jr. received a car from his father before he turned 16 years old. As a result of his success, Abagnale developed an appetite for pursuing women. However, Abagnale believed that in order to be attractive to women, he must first demonstrate his ability to impress them. And, in his mind, having money was synonymous with being successful. He attempted to earn money by working at typical adolescent jobs, but he quickly realized that what he was aspiring to required far more than what he could earn from part-time jobs. So the next step was to obtain a credit card from his father. Things began to go awry when he devised his first scheme, which was based on the fact that he now had a credit card in his possession. Abagnale took advantage of people by charging them for mechanical work that was never completed and for car parts that were never delivered. He amassed a large amount of debt, and his first con was exposed. Even though he had committed numerous sins, his father forgave him. However, his mother had a fit and sent him to a very strict boarding school. Boarding school was difficult for him, not because of the rules and regulations, but because he could no longer impress girls. The allure of a lifestyle. What do you say when someone asks you, what motivates you? A significant influence on many people's lives is the attainment of a particular lifestyle and level of quality of life. Abagnale's experience of boarding school life was far from the lifestyle that he had envisioned for himself. Abagnale always considered himself to be a bit of a Casanova and a playboy in his heart. An all-boys boarding school was hardly the ideal environment in which to hone his abilities. When he returned home, he was devastated to discover that his parents had divorced and that they had lost much of their former fortune. He decided to leave home and try to make a go of it on his own. He was 16 years old and living on his own, but he possessed a maturity far beyond his years. He relocated to New York, where he gained 10 years on his age. Following that, there was a rampage of check forgery. He was to cash a total of $2.5 million in forged checks over the course of his life. His pilot study, to be precise. Popular folklore holds that women are attracted to men in uniform. According to Dave from the HBO comedy series Flight of the Conchords, women are drawn to three things: men in kilts, Southern comfort, and Chris Isaac's Wicked Game. Frank Abagnale Jr. decided to take a page out of the book of popular folklore and pose as a Pan Am pilot in order to get away with murder. He began by observing pilots and flight attendants in order to gain an understanding of the workplace culture. He then faked a pilot's license and sweet-talked his way into a uniform warehouse in order to obtain a custom-made uniform for himself. As a result, his transformation was complete. He became a deadhead as a result of his newly discovered ticket to anywhere, which allowed him to travel throughout the United States. Using the ruse of reporting for duty at your destination, you can obtain free passage. Even though you may be skeptical about the possibility that a teenager could deceive the airline industry and fly indiscriminately across the country, airport security was very different back then. The only thing Abagnale was careful about was that he didn't try to fly any of the planes himself, but instead boarded them as a deadhead instead. The other advantage of being a Pan Am pilot was that he was able to stay in a variety of hotels and accumulate a credit account that could be used to reimburse the airline. Doctoring his degree is a euphemism for doctoring his life. When Abagnale moved to Riverbend, he filled out his rental application form with the words doctor in the box marked for employment. He happened to have a doctor as a next-door neighbor in his new apartment. So, Once again, he employed his powers of observation and conversational techniques to become acquainted with his next-door neighbor and learn a few useful tips and tricks. In the aftermath, he forged official documents and pretended to be on medical leave. Despite his unethical behavior, Frank Abagnale had a strong sense of moral obligation, and he did not want to put patients' lives in danger by treating them. He did, however, accept a position as a shift supervisor, where he was in charge of a large number of interns, which he enjoyed. Abagnale spent his spare time honing his persona and becoming more knowledgeable about medical terminology so that he could be even more convincing. He eventually decided to leave the medical field before anything too disastrous occurred. There is law and order in chaos. One of Frank Abagnale Jr.'s most notable accomplishments was the fact that he actually passed the Louisiana bar examination. Later, he obtained employment with the Louisiana State Attorney's Office after obtaining a phony Harvard University degree. When a colleague, who had actually attended Harvard, picked up on a rat, the game was officially over. Abagnale came to the conclusion that his fictitious legal career should come to an end. You might also be wondering how he managed to get away with all of this forgery and deceit. Frank Abagnale was of interest to the FBI because he had a history of bounced checks. He was, on the other hand, difficult to track down because he was inventive in the way he chose the routing numbers on his checks. Using those particular numbers, he ensured that his checks would bounce in the shortest amount of time possible. When Sean O'Reilly was assigned the case, he made it his personal mission to apprehend Abagnale and bring him to justice. Abagnale narrowly escaped capture on a number of occasions during the course of the investigation. In the end, after years of evading the law in the United States, he decided on a change of scenery and forged a passport that would take him to France. It was in this location that Abagnale's criminal career came to a comparatively unremarkable close. He was taken into custody in a grocery store. In addition to being a pilot, he has worked as a lawyer, a professor, and a doctor before being arrested while doing something as insignificant as grocery shopping in the middle of nowhere. Behind bars is a good place to start. Frank Abagnale Jr. spent 6 months in Perpignan as an exchange student. In addition, while it may appear that this was a brief assignment, the conditions were appalling. Following that, he was relocated to Sweden, which was a more luxurious location in comparison. He was extradited back to the United States after he was threatened with a slew of prison sentences in a variety of countries. Knowing that he would be met by O'Reilly when he disembarked the plane, Abagnale is said to have attempted to flee by hiding in a restroom on board the plane. Eventually, when he was locked up again, he managed to escape once more, this time with the assistance of an ex-girlfriend. The ball is in your court. The fear of being apprehended is extremely powerful, and criminals frequently become exhausted while on the run. Frank Abagnale Jr. was arrested at the Canadian border. Was eventually apprehended after serving some time in prison. He made the decision to pursue good, honest work after a long career in criminal activity. After a rocky start in the job market, Abagnale returned to his roots and established himself as a security consultant with expertise in forgery and detection. Abagnale & Associates is a law firm based in Tulsa, Oklahoma, that specializes in fraud. He also provides training to FBI agents on topics such as identity theft and cybercrime. Finally, I'd like to say, Catch Me If You Can is an engrossing case study on confidence tricksters and emotional intelligence that should be read by everyone. You can't be a world-class con artist unless you have keen observational skills and excellent listening abilities. It is true that observation is a skill that can be learned, but Abagnale believes that he has been born blessed, or cursed, with the ability to pick up on details and items that the average man overlooks. The art of con is the ability to analyze fine details and remember them. As a result, having a good memory and being able to keep up with the hustle is one of the most difficult aspects of being successful. Frank Abagnale Jr. was successful because he was a self-assured individual who was also very shrewd, innovative, and courageous. The act of lying is difficult to maintain, and it is much easier to recall the truth than it is to recall a lie. When it comes down to it, the devil is always in the details, so pay attention. However, as is true of most criminals, the chances of being apprehended are extremely high. This is because the ego is extremely powerful, and at some point, the con artist will go too far in an attempt to outwit those who are pursuing them. The legitimacy of Abagnale's story is widely questioned, and the book claims to be based on a true story, which is supported by the author's assertions. Furthermore, O'Reilly is based on Joseph Shea, who remained a close friend of Abagnale's throughout his life. The possibility that some of the book's claims were false was not beyond the realm of possibility. After all, a con artist's only weapon is his brain, as the saying goes. Thank you for listening in Audiobook Academy. Please don't forget to subscribe for more content like this. See you in next audiobook.